Hi, I'm Carla Sands. I'm the chair of our Foreign Policy Initiative at AFPI, and I'm thrilled to welcome today the chairman for the China House Select Committee, Chairman Moolenaar. He's from Michigan. He's going to talk to us about the threat of the Chinese Communist Party and our agriculture. So the first question I have for you, Chairman, is how does the Chinese acquisition of American agriculture businesses, how does it affect the United States, our security, and perhaps, our food, I will say our food security as well?
Well, you're absolutely right. Food security is national security, and China has a very aggressive goal in this area. Just for example, when they bought Smithfield, they gave them access to farmland as well as technologies. And we've seen over the years they've been very aggressive trying to buy land near military bases. They're willing to leverage these opportunities. We saw during COVID when they leveraged personal protective equipment and other healthcare related items when it suited their interests. And so farmland being so important to America, it's a concern whenever a entity of concern like China owns that property.
100%. So why is agricultural dominance, and especially in sectors like pork production, you mentioned Smithfield ham, why is that a national security issue rather than just an agricultural issue?
Well, this is key infrastructure, and we rely on that infrastructure. And we've seen how China is even willing to hack, our telecommunications, our infrastructure, electric grid, other areas. Imagine if they have control over these infrastructure that are so important for feeding Americans. And China's very dominant in the area of some of these technologies, drones, others, and they are going to leverage that every way possible.
Well, Chairman, speaking about that, and I've seen recently that even our water supply is compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, that they're in our systems, as you just said. And then I understand about the pork and their controls of Smithfield ham and other food supply chains. They've threatened us about rare earth minerals. They've threatened us about pharmaceutical precursors. Do you have any concern that they could affect our food, including our pork?
I do, because as we've seen, they're willing to leverage whatever advantage they have. You mentioned the rare earths. Right now, President Trump is working on getting them to back away from leveraging that. But that was a real wake-up call around the world as to the dominance that China has secured in this area. And we've seen a pattern when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. They try and extract as much information, learn as much as they can from American technologies and resources, and then they will try and dominate that and drive American businesses out of business, and then they dominate the industry. We've seen it in drones, we've seen it in cranes. You see this, they're trying to do it in semiconductors. Imagine if they had control over our infrastructure relative to agriculture. Now, one thing I did want to mention is we've seen them investing in seed technology. We've seen them investing in biotechnology, buying farmland, buying agriculture infrastructure. This is part of a regular play that they run where they try and take over a specific industry.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It brings to mind the fact that Chinese people have been arrested recently. I think they were actually involved maybe with Michigan,
Yes.
University of Michigan, that they were trying to bring sort of blights and illness that would destroy our crops. And that we know that our citrus industry in Florida has been decimated by some kind of not American pest. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, and I give the Trump administration credit because they are prosecuting people for doing this. We had two Chinese nationals that were researchers at the University of Michigan bringing in foreign agents, biological agents, lying about it at the airport. And fortunately, they were arrested and prosecuted. But this could have done damage to our agriculture in Michigan, around the world. And it's something that we need to be vigilant and recognize. And here's the difference, because some people would say, well, you have all these Chinese nationals, don't look suspiciously at all of them. And we love the Chinese people. Unfortunately, the Chinese national security laws will leverage any Chinese national, no matter where they are in the world, them and their families, to carry out the bidding of the CCP. If they don't carry out the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party, then they risk being prosecuted as traitors.
That's right. And in fact, they don't have a choice because of that national security law. They have tasked that every student that comes to the United States has to bring back information. So they're tasked really to steal information. We love the people, but the government is so evil. The Chinese Communist Party is so evil that it's forcing tourists and students, business people to steal secure information, whether it's in person or through electronically. Do you worry at all about other industries being taken over? I can see that Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins has been working to secure our farmland so that Chinese nationals or people connected to the Chinese Communist Party aren't allowed to own that farmland. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think she's done a great job. She came out recently and announced the initiative that's going to have the USDA and her leadership involved with what's called the CFIUS process, which evaluates foreign ownership of land, and also making any ownership of land more transparent, because that's the other thing. They have all these shell companies, and that transparency is really going to be key. And then just highlighting the importance of that and having the Department of Agriculture at the table when these decisions are made, I think is a huge step forward.
Huge. And then what about, talk to me a little bit about Chinese-made drones or data tools in agriculture, and how can they be used by China in a nefarious way that can affect our farmers or our national security?
Great question. You know, China has a surveillance society. They are all about the cameras, the electronics that monitor their own people. The biggest victim is their own people.
That's right.
And when you consider their dominance in some of these electronics areas, drones, DJI drones has about 80% of the market. And what they do is they drive out other businesses by government subsidies and strategic ways that make it so that people are dependent on Chinese drones. So even in agriculture, when they're gathering information and monitoring what's happening on the farm, if they're using a DJI drone, China has the capabilities to access information. And we've seen that in autonomous vehicles. We saw that in our ports where we had Chinese cranes that had a cellular modem that could monitor what was coming in and out of the port. So this is an area where they're trying to do this in the automotive industry with autonomous vehicles. I think 9 out of the 10 companies doing research in this area in California were affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a strategy. They want to have their surveillance society and their values exported around the world, and that's why it's so important that we push back and support America first.
I so agree with you. Tell me a little bit more about seed technology, and maybe there's a company, Syngenta. Can you tell us a little bit about this and why you're concerned?
Yeah, I think in all of these, you have hardworking Americans working at some of these companies. They're doing great work. But when you have a company that's bought by an affiliation related to China, these companies actually end up swearing allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party, often in their own bylaws. And so immediately when that transfers ownership, you have a different worldview, a different criteria that's used. And so I'm concerned about all these entities because ultimately they have leverage over the American people. And that's something that, as much as Americans who work for the companies are going to try and push back, at the end of the day, we know who the master is, and it's the Chinese Communist Party.
Right, and even a company that they have an interest in, they'll have a board seat and they force the technology transfer. There's all kinds of bad things that come. And so when investors look at a company they want to invest in, American investors, I hope they're not going to choose to invest in companies that help the Chinese Communist Party in their quest for domination, whether it's in military technology or farmland technology. We need to boost American technology first and then that of our allies, I think.
And, you know, that's the key. When you look at the innovation that's occurring, our American companies, our universities, our researchers, our innovators are second to none. But we can't allow China to continue to steal those technologies, leverage people involved in this research, and then have the ownership of commercialization, because we've seen with the rare earth materials, they're willing to lock that down. Our supply chains are incredibly affected, and they are willing to leverage this for their own political advantage.
Yes, and sometimes the Chinese Communist Party has had members of their, what they used to call the Thousand Talents program, where they've been part of the Chinese military, and then they're sent to do research at one of our universities. I can remember being in a Microsoft lab working on quantum computing. Every single grad student in that lab were Chinese nationals with their cell phone in their hand.
Right.
And so no threat there, right?
Well, and in terms of students, some of those students want to just learn about their field, go back home, and then use it in whatever way. Some would love to be part of the American dream and would love to live here and be in a land of freedom. Others are going to be seriously leveraged by the Chinese Communist Party, and those are the ones we need to identify, have a vetting process, and make sure that they aren't accessing the best technologies, and that's our goal.
Chairman Moolenaar, before we say goodbye, is there anything you want to leave our audience with as your last thought for them?
Well, I think it's important, as we said, we love the people of China, but the Chinese Communist Party is becoming more aggressive. It's very different. 25 years ago, we'd hoped that Xi Jinping and the leadership in China at that time would become more democratic, more freedom-loving. They've gone just the opposite direction. It's important that President Trump is taking a firm hand in these negotiations, and we just need to be aware and continue to focus on American ingenuity, our values, and we will continue to lead the way.
Oh, I so appreciate that. And I have to say personally, President Trump is the first national leader in the United States, the first U.S. president, that ever said that Chinese Communist Party is a threat to us. So I really give him credit for waking up so many, not just in the United States, but now our allies around the world.
Very true. And he's getting our allies to work together with us, putting more towards their defense.
Right.
A lot of good things happening in the world because of President Trump's leadership.
It's true. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador.